Hello and welcome to this video. I'm very pleased to have an old friend of the channel now. I can't believe I can say that after so many years, but we've got Ben Makinen here, who is a brilliant jazz drummer, but he's also a brilliant documentary filmmaker, and he's made documentaries about jazz. He's very knowledgeable about jazz history. But I'm going to be chatting to him about something different. He has mentioned something to me which I have found as well. I mean, we're both jazz musicians, so we want to be able to get there up and jazz. You say what you want to say, don't you? You can, nobody's standing there. You've got the jazz police now, but on the whole, there's no piece of paper telling you what you've got to say. You can say what you want. That's the whole idea, isn't it?
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, that's the whole purpose for playing the music we play. I mean, when I was a teenager, there was a small clique of us that would get together in the basement and listen to the records and play. And it was all about shedding the BS. I mean, the whole thing about jazz was freedom, expressing yourself, but we were all on hyper alert for bullshit, for jive, for anyone for faking it. And that was the whole point, is refining everything about us, the things we said, the things we thought, the things we studied. We were seeking truth. And we were, specifically for music, we were seeking tone, and groove, and authenticity within that. And
groove is truth, isn't it? Groove is truth.
Groove is truth.
It is, yeah.
On so many levels. And then for a groove is truth, especially for us drummers.
Yeah.
When you're soloing, it's the tone and the melodies and the lines. What are you saying? Are you just playing licks? Are you just copying, the master? And that's BS. We call BS right away. Two notes, and you can tell if someone's jiving it, if they're BSing. And they have no business being on stage with you at that point. And so it's bizarre to me as an artist, in our moderately advanced years now, Andy, to be in a culture where, after having spent a life, living as outsiders, almost
yes.
Okay, at the fringe for seeking the truth. Now we're afraid. We're self-censoring ourselves, even in the solitude of our own homes. Our thoughts, within this cancel culture, out of fear of losing a living, being ostracized from the workforce. Even as an artist, which we're already on the fringes, now we've got artists who will turn you into the art police.
Yeah, and you've said stuff like this, and obviously your move from being a jazz musician to being a jazz documentary filmmaker. And I know I first came across you when I started to become critical of the Ken Burns jazz documentary, which is a great documentary, and I always enjoy watching it. But their truth is there already before they started. But your jazz documentaries, yours is like, if you actually want to know what the jazz scene is like now and how jazz musicians think and how that relates to the history, go and watch one of your jazz documentaries. Because I don't feel you went in there with an agenda. You went in there just to try and tell the truth.
That's right. My first film, Jazztown, was really an effort to pay homage to my mentors. It's an ode to my mentors, and I wanted to personally thank them for having given me a chance to get up on stage with them. I mean, these are guys who had played with Monk and Parker and Armstrong, and I wanted to, and I knew that once they had died, their stories would be forgotten. They'd be a footnote in the great jazz history books. So yeah, I wanted them to tell their story. What is jazz, and why did you spend a lifetime playing something that 99% of the time doesn't reward you very well? There's a Grammy winner. I did interview Diane Reeves, who's very successful, 5-time Grammy winner, and another guy, Charles Burrell, who had a successful career as a bass player, in large part because he got into the symphonies. So he was a contracted symphony player, the first African American to do so, by the way, Charles Burrell. And in a way, he loved classical music. When he was 12 years old and heard it on the radio, that's what he wanted to do. But classical music supported his jazz habit. So when the symphony gig was over, he went to the 5 Points part of town and backed up Ella Fitzgerald and Billie Holiday and played with Charlie Parker and and Louis Armstrong.
I mean, that's a proper musician, isn't it? That you could do that.
Well, you know what? He has an amazing autobiography. And so while he's working as a symphony bass player, while he's backing up these people, he takes on other day jobs to pay the bills and, so to afford the lifestyle. I mean, he liked fine wine and cigars and fast cars. So between gigs, he was working as a porter at the airport. He spent one summer polishing the Red Rocks Amphitheater, U2, the band U2 made it famous. He would, before the symphony gig, they had a symphony in the park, whatever, a summer concert series. And before that started at night, he'd get there in the day and as a janitor, clean and polish the stone steps, then go down, shower, put on his tux. I mean, it's phenomenal. And
those stories tell you something. There's a truth there that if you go in with an agenda of what you want to say and the point you want to make, you can't make that up, because it's like it does. Yeah, you said he's the first African American classical bassist, and that's like, oh, isn't that wonderful? But at the same token, he was also having to polish the steps so he could perform, and you wonder how many other people were doing that at the time, and those little stories, there's a nuance there. Now, one of the times when you came on, I was talking to you and we were talking about the origins of jazz, and you said something quite innocuous that felt it should be, probably makes sense, that in America, where you have Native Americans, that they may have played a part in the creation of jazz. And we went on and had a chat about this, and the pushback was quite phenomenal, wasn't it? With other people actually making videos to try and pull you down. I mean, I got it, but you got it, and I felt sorry for you because you'd come on and really got it. And so this comment you've said, we've both been there, both because of my channel. If you were doing that video again, knowing that someone was going to try and not just argue against you, but really try and accuse you of being bigoted, prejudiced, a liar, whatever it is, trying to erase the history of black people, which, me knowing you, is unbelievably ridiculous. It's like apps. So, how do you find yourself self-censoring now as an artist?
Wow. Well, yeah, that's a great question. One which maybe I shouldn't even answer out of fear of no, but we're going to get into that. Yeah. The thing about the natives, and I'll answer your question. The thing about the Native Americans, and I touch upon that. Here's what happened with that. I made a movie called Echoes of Tradition, and it'll hopefully be releasing soon. It's on the festival circuit. In the course of making that movie, I jumped into more research, which I think furthers my case. Echoes of Tradition touches upon it and introduces some ideas. But I have more information that substantiates it even more strongly. And to be clear, these are things that kind of blew my mind. I spent a whole career, 40 years playing drums before I found any of this out. So I understand the cognitive dissonance, or the shock and the disbelief and the threat to the predominant narrative. And a lot of people don't realize how emotionally invested they become in something that they had no part of to begin with. None of us living were alive at the birth of jazz. Most of us aren't related to anybody who was. But many people find themselves becoming so emotionally invested in information that if they think about it, they only got from a book or from a TV show or from a YouTube.
So you get a situation where you're a documentary filmmaker, spending months and months interviewing people with no preconditioning in your mind of what you want to say, finding something else that is a shock. You go, oh my God, this is going to make a great documentary. And then when you go out and say it, people will turn around and go, this bloke knows nothing, even though he's been researching it, even though he's been interviewing all these people, even though he's got all this evidence. I saw a poster for Black History Month and the jazz musicians on that were black. I mean, it's literally you got when people are pushing back. I'm thinking I've spent a lifetime studying this. I know the history, and for me, with this issue, what it was is the history doesn't make sense. And I tell you why it doesn't make sense to me, because I can hear it in the music. It doesn't sound like African music. It sounds like
that's the key.
It sounds like a mixture of all different types of music.
And that's the key, Andy. And this is what. So I'm very careful about these conversations, because you have to start. You have to start with getting some framework, some groundwork. What is jazz?
We're worried even going back into this one, aren't we? Because we hadn't planned to talk about
just a little bit.
And now we're experienced in it. We're both like, and this is what I want to try and explore: what it's like to be a creative person. We're both professionals, so we both do this for a living. How we're self-censoring and the thing with you is, more than me, you're wound into the establishment in a way, because you're part of the Grammys board, aren't you?
I'm a voting member of the.
You're a voting
Recording
member,
Academy. Yeah. I'm part of the producers and engineers wing. Yeah, that's very interesting. Well, it's a very challenging situation, Andy, that borders on, I was going to use the word whistleblowing, and I'm nowhere near that. There are whistleblowers out there that really put their lives at risk but it gets back to, like, I'm an individual with a moral compass, and I think we're all born with a compass that's at whatever point. My life, in retrospect, I can see that my life has been an attempt to polish and fine tune the calibration, if you will, of my moral compass. When you're young and dumb and on the road and, ingesting substances of all kinds and money is being thrown at you, we have a chance as teenagers and young 20-year-olds when we first, as musicians, I'm talking about, although these same challenges, lawyers, doctors, people in any position of power, lawyers, politicians, point is, our life challenges us on how we're going to internalize and the decisions we make, how we're going to make our way through this minefield of temptation or of chaos, and feeding our appetites, our unchecked, naturally occurring appetites. And I think I'm kind of getting a little bit off the path when I use the word appetite, because that ties into the Grammys and stuff. What I'm getting at is my moral compass is such that it tied in with what we talked about as a jazz musician or as an improvisational musician, training ourselves, refining ourselves to be attuned to truth, to be honest, make mistakes, but make honest mistakes and dust yourself off and learn. And
that's not a moral thing. It's the belief that you're going to go somewhere where you don't know where you're going. That's the difference between jazz and classical, isn't it? We don't know where we're going, do we? We don't know where it's going to go. There's a roadmap. We're following it. But that's a fairly accurate.
Well, you made a couple of distinctions. One is that the pursuit of truth in jazz doesn't necessarily have anything to do with morals.
Yeah.
As artists, I think it's so complex, Andy. As human beings, because all human beings are creative. I think all human beings are artists. We create and improvise to survive, even if that just means sharpening a rock and learning how to shoot left-handed as well as right-handed to get some food and bring home whatever. How to build shelters. That's all incredibly creative and improvisational. And the point is as human beings, we are actually hardwired to go anywhere possible in our mind for very important reasons to survive. We can't stop and debate the morals and the complexities of something when something's coming at us. We react,
exactly
right? Okay,
reactive, yeah.
And so as artists, we should embrace jumping into any space our mind is capable of, but coming back, choosing what to share with our community, choosing what we bring back from the space we had visited. That's where where an artist's responsibility to the community, to the village, to the tribe, that's where a moral compass can kick in. And I think if you don't, at that point, if you don't have a moral compass, you run the risk of either being ostracized, which many generations ago meant death, out in the wild, or or you risk potentially feeding into a culture that's pretty dark and devious, and almost enabling people to pursue their unchecked appetites, the abuses of power to satisfy some, what many of us might think is a bizarre desire. And that, of course, we're talking about child sex trafficking and all the implications that come from the arrest of Sean Combs, the freak off parties. I mean, here we are, boom. Okay. Sean Combs is a 3-time Grammy winning. He's in jail now under allegations of a lot of stuff. The public has seen some released videos of him beating up his girlfriend, like kicking her and dragging her by the hair. We know what this guy is capable of. We don't know the whole truth, but the allegations and corroborating sworn affidavits and everything that's come out suggests a culture that goes from the highest levels, from popes, kings, presidents, on down to, A-list athletes, musicians, and actors. Okay.
So let's reframe this from, because obviously people can get online and they can Google this stuff and they'll find all sorts of people talking about it, and this reaction to it and the sort of horror of it is also being industrialized on the, there's many people making money out of that. What I want to get across is that if you're a creative person has a sort of it's like a double-edged sword. It's not pursuing truth. They're unknowing. The thing they're going towards is unknown. This is a true artist. We're all trying to do that. Most of us don't, but we need to do that because it furthers humanity, and it not only enables technology and science to emerge and people to find out truth. There's where your truth is, but it also gets us to be able to re-establish what beauty is. And by re-establishing what beauty is, then morals can come, because I think fundamentally morals, you would fundamentally say that behavior is ugly. It really comes down to that. And
cannibalizing children, for example, like raping and then eating babies, that should not be right in almost anyone's book. However, I just said it. We're able to visualize it. Now we don't have to act on it, but the fact that we can visualize it means, as an artist, whoa, okay, do I talk about that with anybody? Because, do I turn it into a horror movie?
Exactly.
I'm not going to do that, but turns out there are people who do that. And to them, I don't know. I'm convinced that to the people who do that, they're convinced they're participating in something they have a right to do. And additionally to that, if they feel that what they're doing gives them the power to continue serving their purpose, they see their purpose as something beneficial to at least themselves, if not us.
Yeah.
In other words, they probably don't see themselves as doing anything wrong, except possibly being aware that other people see them as being wrong, but they belong to a group of people who believe, if they're serving Satan, or if they're just serving part of the energy field of the universe that feeds them, if they do these other things to people, take the adrenochrome out of a tortured child, or of an animal who's dying, there's things like that. They if you take someone to an extreme edge, and what's really bizarre is these sort of concepts and rituals have been snuck and programmed into things like children's movies. The movie from Pixar, Monsters Inc., is a movie where monsters sneak into children's bedroom, scare the living crap out of them, and the child's scream is captured in a tank, like as a resource, because their scream power fuels the energy grid back in Monster World. Okay, I never thought of that movie as anything but a really clever, well done, awesome children's movie. Like, cool. Because in the end, the monsters discover that the same power actually even more power can be gotten from making a child laugh. Okay, there's the moral justification, I guess. So now in the end, monsters have to retrain, go into children's rooms and tell jokes to make the children laugh, and then they capture the laugh, and the electrical grid is even more efficient than when. But that's in the like the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes of the movie. All I'm saying is that there's some really horrible things people have been doing, and I don't see any justification for it,
Well, it's like there's a number of things at play here. I mean, I'm trying to tease out this narrative of what creative people are like, what you all like, what I'm like. These people who are quite sensitive, usually we're very sensitive to colors or sounds. We're interested in going into realms which is unknown and finding out what's there.
Yes.
And when I say truth seeker, I mean that in the widest sense. I don't think it's really truth that you're going for, but that's a way of. So imagine you have these very sensitive truth seekers, and then they get dropped into a business, and they want to make it. There's this dream of making it, which is allied to the devil's bargain. It's like you meet Satan on the crossroads, and you sort of sign. This has been through the whole folklore of making it, and once you make it, you then become part of an establishment that most normal people don't go near. I've had this on a number, and as soon as you're in that in a number of realms, you start to see that there's a link going up the chain. But as you go up the chain, it's not necessarily up to like good, honest, decent, people right to the top. There are those there, but there's also, as you go up that sort of hierarchy of privilege, that there's all sorts of privileges emerging as you go up. So I'm going to try and explain this very simply. When I was playing in much bigger bands, I didn't have to walk, stop in line. People would do stuff for you if you asked them to. I remember once I needed some money and I saw a fan and just said, "Have you got some money?" when they were trying to get my autograph, and they just handed me money. And I was like, whoa, So people don't understand, once you go into that realm, the moral rules do change. And so what I'm very interested is the fact that you intimated some stuff, and I don't know what it is. You see, I saw it online that you were intimating some facts that you're part of the Grammy. That's the establishment. Yeah. Now the guy that runs the Grammys is Harvey Mason Jr., isn't it?
He's the CEO. Harvey Mason Jr. That's correct.
Yeah. And so his dad is the great Harvey Mason.
He's the son of the great Harvey Mason. Yeah. And
it's got one of the finest touches on the drums of all time. One of my favorite drummers. Don't you think?
He's amazing. Yeah. I mean, he was one of the guys that we're the same age, and I was listening to his records and trying to cop some of those things. And I remember some of the very early linear funk drumming pattern books that came out. These now what would be considered primitive books. Well, it's a book, so that's primitive. But they would have Harvey Mason beats, transcribed along with Steve Gadd and Dugu Chancellor and all these.
Yeah. I mean, these are the gods, and so
when
I was watching this, I was thinking, because my brain's going, he's part of the Grammys thing that's run by Harvey Mason's son, which I looked it up and going, my God, it's Harvey Mason's son. That's mad, and I thought, Harvey Mason's son, because if I was Harvey Mason's son, I'd be going, what's your dad like? Well, there's all that, but at the same token, the Grammys, which is bestowing accolades onto the industry, isn't it? It's supposed to be rewarding great achievements, and yet you seem to feel that it's also unearthing for you something that you're having difficulty weighing against your own morals, or any morals, with that we are dealing with absolute the worst things ever.
Well, that's right, and I would think any decent human being would have to take pause, and so you're right. I eventually spoke to Harvey Mason Jr. on the phone after I made a Facebook post suggesting, when just shortly after Sean Combs was arrested last, I can't remember now if that was September or it was summer to early fall of 2024. Anyway, it became apparent to me that the Grammys should be making a public statement regarding their commitment to safe spaces, because this is Sean Combs is one of the high profile members of an organization that places itself at the pinnacle of artistic achievement. Well, I think, and I broached this a little bit with Harvey, the idea that what I did is I suggested, one, I made it clear that the Grammys are making a big mistake by not acknowledging what happened. You don't have to name names, there's legal implications, but say some horrendous things have happened. Allegations have been made. We as a Grammy, as the Recording Academy, we're on it. We're assessing our, our infrastructure, et cetera. We want to assure the public that whatever happened in these allegations are things that we will not allow to happen in our safe spaces. Something along those lines. I'm not a PR guy, but if you don't make a statement, if you don't acknowledge it, you allow the public to go wild with their, So as a Grammy member, I started my confidence, my pride in the organization. I represent them when I go out, when I put their name on my website or whatever. And the Grammys prides itself on mentoring young people. Well, okay. So we should be proactive. We should be leaders, not only in awarding artists, but in talking about the lifestyle, the challenges that surround, in this case, the profession. I mean, these are challenges found everywhere in the world, not just rich and famous people, abusing children, or, that happens on the poorest levels. That happens everywhere.
Yeah.
But on scale, in mass, in this sort of subculture that celebrates these freak off parties. So I made a post. I got a call. I got an email from my executive director of the San Francisco chapter. All Recording Academy members belong to chapters, divided up across the United States. And each chapter has an executive director, and those executive directors, are connected to the board. And interestingly enough, Harvey Mason Sr. was the president or CEO of the Academy before his son. There's arguably a little nepotism. What happened is
it doesn't matter when you're Harvey Mason's son. That don't mind that. He's allowed to. I just love Harvey Mason. He's one of my favorites.
I know you're joking.
I'll let them off.
I know you're joking and having fun. I wouldn't say that, but Harvey Mason Jr. is very well made for the job. He's charismatic. He's super intelligent, and on the phone, uber professional. I mean, and that's why part of me, the drummer in me, wanted to start off, whoa, Harvey, man, your dad, like what?
I like the conjunction because it shows what musicians are like. I'm trying to pull that out.
See, this is a big point. You and I in this moment, we're acting starstruck, and what we're doing is we're entertaining the idea that our starstruckedness should allow us. I've got a professional on the phone here. Am I going to talk about his father in drums, or we're going to talk about child sex trafficking?
Yeah, exactly. This is
what's more. And not only just talk about child sex trafficking, but talk about why are we not talking about it when we are supposed to be the top professional, mature people in the room. We are the ultimate gatekeepers, the Grammys, right? Putting aside all of the legitimate cynicism and concerns about, the validity of what is a Grammy Award, putting aside all of that, who wins them? Is it a sham? Is it just a popularity contest that you pay for? Putting that aside, we're still, and so here's the kicker. I'm talking to Harvey, and I decide to skip the drum. Your dad is a drum god part. And I say, Harvey, I believe that you as the CEO should be making a public statement that addresses this. He says, Ben, we will not be making a statement like that. We don't get into that area. We don't get into legal.
I don't believe
there's
that.
Legal implications talking about people that haven't been found guilty of anything.
Guilty, there's that, but we're not saying about making that statement, are we?
I said, can we just, how about make a statement generic? Don't name Sean Combs. Don't talk about Buffy. Don't even just a statement that given some things that have happened in the news, we're assuring our membership that we are committed to whatever, women's rights, safe spaces, and I reminded them, this isn't not just about women being abused by people in positions of power. These are men. These are young women and men. These are children. The allegations actually take it down to infants. And it's so horrible. I could describe it to you what I've heard, but it can't be unheard, and you'd probably edit it out.
I don't want that on my channel. So this is the thing, we're trying to talk about something. I don't want that on my channel.
Well, let's not go there. But let me just say. Can
I just say that I can't say what the same thing. We're talking about censorship here. I've had 2 experiences in my life, right? Personal experience with people I've known where I have become aware that what you're talking about is widespread in all sorts of different power things. I'm not going to say what they are at all. People can say, well, I could be lying. Yes, I could be lying, everybody. Sure. But the reason why I'm here is I know what Ben's talking about. I know you could sound like a conspiracy theory, a conspiracy theorist talking about it as well. And I worry that that narrative's out there. Because when you have a narrative where you can't say this is going on because you'll be called a weirdo, that is bad, because we're trying to call out something that's bad here. But yeah, I've had direct experience with people, say for example in the police force, that have told me things that have happened. And of course, here in the UK, we are reeling from they decided to call it a grooming gang scandal, where up to 1 million.
That's a good word, grooming. Yeah, grooming. That's the right word that people are using. Allie Carter is a woman who has submitted sworn affidavits regarding her having been groomed as a child and then used as a sex toy at these parties. We don't, what's more at play for me is what I'm doing in my position as an advocate in the arts. I had this conversation with Harvey Mason Jr. He made it clear, politely clear, that they would not be doing X. They're not going to make a statement that touches on that. I said,
but you could understand, just to give devils, you could understand that no one's been prosecuted. Because I need to do my due diligence as an interview, because I know I'm going along with it. So what do you think? Do you think they should make a statement when nobody's been arrested for anything at the moment?
I do believe they should make a statement that does not allude at all to anyone in jail on allegations. They should just talk in a generalized sense. I mean, look, it takes a level of maturity and honesty to say the whole world knows something's going on. I mean, we all saw helicopter or drone footage from above of a raid on a mansion where a box of almost 1,000 dildos were being taken out. We know about thousands of bottles of baby oil. We've seen a guy in a hotel hallway kicking and dragging a woman. Sexual allegations. Again, we know certain things. We don't have to name people. We don't even have to use the words grooming. We just, as a leader, I think it's responsible to address the elephant in the room that everyone else is talking about, even in the most. Okay, so for example, Harvey's response to me has been as you know, the Recording Academy does support a number of initiatives that are geared towards, let's use the generic term, creating safe spaces. It's really women's advocacy, but those efforts, I said, are not easily found. You can't Google search the Grammys and Sean Combs or the Grammys and that stuff pops up. They're little initiatives that are kind of buried. I think that you should make something that steps out as a thought leader, but the point was, as I said, okay, let's put that aside. You can't do what you say you're not going to do. What about adopting an ethics commission? I said, I found that the International Olympic Committee had adopted an ethics commission back in 1999. I Googled it. It's pretty simple. It's straightforward. I explained the idea is that the Grammys would form a semi-independent, you'd want some Grammy members on it, committee to oversee ethics violations and that's to be defined, and that they would have the power to sanction however you want to define that. We're not going to take Grammys away from people. He said, well, that's fine for now. That's the point, is start with the next ethics commission, let it build and see where it takes you. But that's one way of assuring people that you're aware of something happening and you're concerned enough to, to dedicate some resources. We're talking about a nearly $1 billion corporation. So he said, Ben, I like the idea of an ethics commission. That is something I can stand behind. Submit it to the proper channels, get it to your executive director. She'll shoot it to me. I'll walk it into a board meeting, which was coming up at the time we spoke. The board meeting was coming up in about 2 or 3 weeks. The long or the short of that is I did. It's complicated. It wasn't as easy as it should have been. There were some hoops to jump through, and I felt like I was being brushed off. My honest takeaway is that when I made my Facebook post, I tagged a few people. It raised some red flags, and someone at the Recording Academy said, "Let's get this guy to quiet down. Right? We need this to go away." So they got on a phone. They gave me the runaround because I said I wanted to talk to Harvey Mason Jr. I wanted to get a message to him. Blah blah blah. I got the runaround. It finally happened. Harvey called me. He left his cell phone number for me. He talked to me. Then when I went back to my executive director in San Francisco, the first thing on the phone call was, Ben, do you feel that your problem has been addressed, and are you satisfied? Like, in other words, will you be quiet now?
Right now, yeah.
It was astounding. And the bottom line is, I had to reformat my proposal I had to follow the procedures for a submission to the board, and it got done, and it was confirmed that it was delivered. But that was back in by the end of November of last year. Now, what's interesting is the time frame for some other related activities. And so the period when I had called suggesting that the Recording Academy get on the front of this with a statement. And the reason is, check this out, Andy. Andy Edwards, my Anglo-Indian drumming brother. You're a badass too. Sean Combs berated the Grammys in 2020. He stood up at a function, and I believe it was for 40 minutes, went on a rant straight to the Recording Academy board members and everyone, swearing. I don't know if I could swear on your show, but he said, you got to get your together. And his point was about making the Grammys more DEI, more Black, diversified. In 2020, he was making the point, why aren't we seeing more African Americans up here winning? And the next day or the next week, Harvey Mason Jr. made a press release that was reprinted in Rolling Stone magazine, Billboard, addressing Sean Combs' concerns, basically appeasing Puff Daddy and saying, you know what, you're right, we're on it, things are going to change. So that was 2020. So Puffy, who at that time was doing all of these alleged things, had the audacity to get up and lecture the Recording Academy on what it needed to do, the right thing it needed to do. The next day, the CEO is making a press release to all of the Hollywood news outlets, making a big international statement. We're on it. We hear you. You're right. Now the guy has done some pretty bad things, and we're going to what? We're just not going to say anything. So that sits wrong with me. The presidential election came up. The U.S. feds had collected all of these blackmail tapes. The other component of this, for anyone who hasn't been following the news, is that these freak off parties that Puffy held started here in the evening, and then when presumably those uninvited were sent home at the midnight hour, the real party happened in the back rooms and in the tunnels, and that's where very, very bad things were done to people. Many of those people innocent. They were drugged and they were physically abused in many kinds of ways, and everything was taped to be used as blackmail, allegedly. Well, these tapes have been collected, and now they exist on a similar level as the Epstein files, right? Everyone wants to know what's happened to the people on the Jeffrey Epstein list. What's happened to the people in the Puff Daddy Freak Off Party tapes? Well, excuse me. No, nothing was moving. The U.S. presidential election came to a boil. People were saying, well, maybe they're waiting for Kamala Harris to win, because if the Democrats win, these tapes will go away. And because most of these people on these tapes are wealthy Democratic Party donors from the Hollywood camp. You know, if you want to break America into two camps, it's the wealthy. Well, anyway, there you could get into.
It's just, I mean, the fact that you're having to walk around saying this.
Right.
And well, I'm getting into all sorts of trouble because obviously
I'm just a messenger. Now, let me be clear. It's probably too late to be clear, but I'm just a messenger. All I have done is correlated things other people have researched. I could be totally wrong. You know, who knows? The thing is that you should have a right to be able to say this. I'm sat here and I'm all the way through this. I'm thinking, does this go on the main channel or should I stick this on Patreon? I might put it on Patreon. I might make an edit, and then, you know, because I'm frightened. And then I'm thinking, what are you saying right now? Because you know what it is? It's things like when you say the DEI thing. You know, that worries me. You know, when you say it's the Democrats involved in all of this, that's worries me. No, I didn't get to finish. Here, I'm in the middle. It's not. It's Democrats and Republicans. It's everyone. And so this is the deal. I was wondering, in my mind, I was thinking, well, the Recording Academy is going to sit on this. I, in my naive way of thinking, I thought, send an email, suggest an ethics commission. Because of the times we live in, someone's going to go, yeah, even if it's just a political Band-Aid, let's do this. And let's make an announcement to the world. Yeah. Man, the stuff that people think is going on, we don't know. But since it's a possibility, we're going to crackle. We're going to make an ethics commission, and we're going to be so on top of it that even if it even starts to, if the idea hatches anywhere, we're going to be on it. Well, the point is the elections were coming up. Some people thought that if Trump got into office, he's going to pop the lid on the puffy tapes and let everyone see, because they're all these, you know, Democratic liberal. It wasn't. It's everybody. So the presidential election goes by. The tapes are being sat on. Then what happens in October? This is interesting. And it made me understand why Harvey Mason Jr., who is politically very qualified to lead the Grammys, because he's got what it takes to maintain a great public image. Guess what happened at the end of October? I believe it was now October 30th, I think, is when the announcement was made. The Grammys signed a 10-year licensing deal with Disney for Disney to broadcast the Grammys. That and that kicks in 2027. But so when I was talking to Harvey on the phone, this is what's amazing. He took the time to talk to me a few weeks before $1 billion deal is getting ready to be penned. You know, no wonder they're shaking in their boots. I'm not saying it's all because of me, but obviously you don't want to start talking about child sex trafficking when you're about ready to sign a 10-year deal with Disney. The public announcement said the deal was worth $600 million. 10 years ago, the Recording Academy signed a deal. They renegotiated a deal with, I think that was ABC, who had their license to broadcast the Grammys. 10 years ago, the deal was worth $500 million.
Are you aware of the French animator for Pixar who has just been arrested?
That news broke 3 days after the announcement of Grant. Right there. So the Disney Pixar animator, who was one of their top animators for films like Ratatouille, The Invincibles, or The Incredibles, and Soul, the jazz movie Soul. This guy was paying women in the Philippines to rape children in a room on film. And then he was on his microphone telling the women what to do to these children. And he did that over 100 times. And he's in jail now for 25 years, but but here's the thing. He was arrested in San Francisco in 2021 and extradited to France, because he was already on the French sex predator list. He had abused his then girlfriend's daughter. It might've been his stepdaughter. He had already been busted in France for sexual abuse of a minor. So he was on their records. They arrested him in San Francisco, sent him to France. He sat in prison for 3 to 4 years, and and they didn't make a public announcement about this until 3 days after the deal with Disney was signed. So now we have the Recording Academy, Grammys, and Disney going into a 10-year, ostensibly billion-dollar licensing agreement, and they both have employees or award-winning members who have been arrested on charges of really bad stuff. So this isn't looking good. Now, okay, now if for me, if I was running a company, I'd say, "Holy crap,
we need to make a statement right now. We need
let's get some PR on this. Yeah, let's just clean this up."
We know nothing about this. We do not condone it in any shape or form. It's now the thing is that the problem here is that as soon as Puff Daddy says there could be racism going on, everyone jumps in, and it's like they got to make a statement. This is what I was going to say to you. You know, if there was an accusation of racism, that the Academy would be up straight away. They wouldn't be saying, "Let's quieten this down." They would make a statement. Now, racism is awful, but at the moment, probably the biggest scourge in humanity is child sex trafficking. And it's and anybody who's looked into it knows how rife this is. I'm a dad. I've got kids. It's absolutely terrifying. It's terrifying. And as terrible as racism is, or being transphobic, or whatever these things are, I find it strange that we're so quick to jump on that and stamp that out, which is a terrible thing. My point is that if you want to stamp that out so quick, why not this? Now, a few years ago, we had the Me Too movement. Why has the Me Too movement? The Me Too movement happened, and this has sort of come out off the back of that, hasn't it? As soon as that actually got traction, you think?
I actually have never, I have not looked into a connection between those two till now. I mean, ostensibly all of this is related. On one level, a lot of these things are manipulated behind the scenes by by the deep state, by the arm, the propaganda arm that can use this information. For example, if you're a blackmailer, you keep the goods you have until you need them. Obviously, it's even like playing poker, playing cards. You keep your great cards until the right time, right? So, so the people who understand what's going on are able to manipulate our awareness of these things to suit their needs of how our attention gets directed or misdirected. But here's the thing with racism. I hope someone calls it out. It brings that up just so that we begin the discussion, because it's so not a racist thing. It has nothing to do with racism. Let's call it racism. Then we can address it and put that fire out and move on to the bigger issue. I mean, ostensibly Clive Davis, the very white man, was behind setting up Puffy. So now there could be racist. So let's be clear. People who are guilty of the things you and I are talking about, the transgressions against innocent young people, are they're people across the scale of politics, of finance, of race. I mean, these are abuses committed by people in power, men and women, from time immemorial that we know of all walks of life. And you can't even call it satanic, because that assumes a belief. That assumes that someone has a belief in a higher, in that sort of good bad dichotomy, spirituality. Some of them probably ostensibly there are people who get off on that and they're like, yeah, Satanism, bro, all the way. Other people just see it as a portal to power. It's an addiction. They found something that feeds their need for power, which goes back to what you said. You were talking earlier, Andy, about artists. You were talking about the slippery slope of artists and people who climb a ladder.
This is the thing I don't think anyone's ever said. This is what I wanted to bring in.
Right. You talked about how it's a slippery slope on selling your soul, as you put it. It's that's the cliche. I think people understand what we mean. Whose are you going to suck to get the position ahead or to get your record released? And here's the thing I never thought about until you were bringing this up. Why does it seem to be that way? And you said there are some good people out there, and I'm sure there are some good people who run companies where a person can succeed without having to. But it struck me that one of the reasons why so many, let's call it bad or morally people with a moral compass that goes in a different direction than many of us feel is necessary to keep society alive and functioning. Yeah. Those kind of people want more, and what I've observed is that as soon as someone wants more than is enough, that's where these soul selling conflicts arise. I mean, I live in Bali. I go down the road and I see men and women carrying boulders on their head with an old knife or a bundle of vegetation they're carrying to feed their cow. They've got no shirt on. They're walking in sandals. I've seen the homes they live in. I've married into that culture. I have relatives, that live on dirt floors. They don't actually have much option to go get more, but they live with what they have, and they have incredible moments of joy. They're able to live in it with less stress, the kind of stresses that someone who's trying to maintain a garage full of cars and to get the next recording deal and to get more likes, to get the 30 million likes needed to get a Grammy, whatever, all that stuff. We run into moral problems when we want more than we really need. I think. And the kicker is, and society, most of our modern day society doesn't really allow a person to live a happy life with just what they need, and you've heard these arguments. Buckminster Fuller said that, he said the youth were right. We shouldn't be all having to make a living. The need to make a living is what's tripping a lot of people up from accessing their deeper, innovative, creative sides that could benefit all of humanity. We're in a rat race, and in a desperation to get out. The irony is that in an attempt to get out of under the thumb of an oppressive lifestyle, we sell our soul to get what we think will give us the freedom that really ends up enslaving us.
Yeah.
Wow, doing a lot of bad things to people around us.
And I think if you stand back and look at human history, this is absolutely apparent. Like you said, it's in fairy tales, it's in stories, it's in the nature of certain types of civilization. There is an argument that at some point in our distant history, that obviously cannibalism took place. Right, cannibalism has taken place and is taking place now, all the way through history. Now, I
have a friend who actually knows Eduardo, one of the survivors from the Andean the soccer team that crashed. That's a different cannibalism. If you're eating people that have died out of the necessity to survive, like you're trapped on a frozen mountainside, half your buddies are dead already. I mean, that's very different than getting a bunch of dudes and so go ahead.
If you look at human history, if we have a taboo where we go, cannibalism doesn't really happen. It happens every now and then. It's a weird thing. No, it's happened all the way through human history. Right. In the Second World War, in all sorts of towns that were cut off, and it's always going to happen.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that part. I got to check that out.
Oh yes, which one was it? Not Stalingrad. The port city when the Germans just cut it off, and people were eating. I mean, their grandparents. When Stalin deliberately starved the Ukraine, that region, they were eating each other. So people eat each other. They've always ate each other. Now, when you go back through that history, you start to realize there's a lot of...
I'm sorry, Andy, but there is a total Monty Python beneath the surface of that.
It's just what I'm saying is there's a taboo there where people think...
Yes.
That this is a real thing, and it's through human history, like you said, when needs have needed, human beings will eat each other. We're not like other animals that can't eat other animals don't like the taste of their own species. You can't. I don't think you can feed a dog.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
In Bali, that could be true. In Bali, I mean, animals, we all get so hungry here. We have wild cats. Most Balinese don't keep domesticated animals the way Westerners think about it. Animals don't go inside homes and sit on beds. We don't pet them; they stay outside. And as such, I've seen cats eat some bizarre things that you wouldn't. And pigs, I've seen pigs eat everything in their slops here. I'm not arguing your point. I'm just saying I think starvation, even among animals, could bring. My cat eats durian fruit. When we throw, when do cats eat fruit?
I did a video the other day where I deliberately put myself. I thought I'm going to try and find out what the meaning of life is, and I did this sort of. I thought I'm going to go free associate and see where I go, and I ended up talking about going to the toilets, all these. I realized that when you take away our sort of comfortable civilization, you're not worried about the big things. You start to worry about how am I going to survive? How am I going to do this? Where am I going to go to the toilet? And I realized that
that's right.
For most of human history, going to the toilet, especially for women, must have been a really risky thing to do. And so there's
women in jazz. You just nailed a very interesting component, arguably, of why there weren't more women in early jazz touring, for example, and the lack of feminine hygiene. In other words, the invention of the tampon really enabled women to be more mobile.
Yeah, and so these my point is that these things have structured human history far more than highfalutin philosophical ideas. Now, at ancient times, I think certain let's call them tribes or whatever you want to call them, that when they ate their I mean, there seemed to be a very strong respect for the person you're fighting in these ancient sort of ethics. And so they believe that there was some sort of spiritual intake by eating. I mean, it's like when people eat certain things because they think they're aphrodisiacs, like a rhino. And so now, I at some point in human history, this is the point I'm trying to get to, we started to eat human brains. And it actually seems to coincide with a sudden human beings suddenly go. Now, I don't know whether this is because the brain is, I mean, brains could be that they're so nutritious, that they're full. I don't know. Or it could
arguably the liver. It's arguably the liver is more so. I've heard what you're talking about, the brains. Those are ideas worth exploring. I think it's pretty hard. I'd like to see the research that can connect.
I'm not saying this is scientifically true. What I'm saying is if you go through human history, it's overwhelming that there's cannibalism and that there's the idea that you gain something more than just the nutritional value by consuming something, by consuming this person or consuming a child. So at the moment, everyone knows that in the Congo, for example, there are armies that before they go to battle will eat a child. It's part of their belief system that will make them.
I never heard of this.
Yeah,
this is all new to me.
Yeah,
you said the Congo. Tell me about.
I don't know if it's the Congo. I just made a name up. It's in some African place like the Congo. You remember you're on the Andy Edwards thing here. It's like there's facts here, but you need to go and check them out. I'm not saying it's true. It's like we're having a chat. But yeah, I watched a documentary where they'd interviewed various warlord groups. And there's this belief there. I hope somebody in the comments will back this up or say. What I'm saying is that even if this isn't true.
You're Andy Edwards.
I'm pretty sure it is true. But even if it isn't true, this is a very strong and powerful narrative that goes through human history, through all cultures, right? This idea that by consuming in some way somebody, you gain something in doing that.
Okay, let's pause right there. Let's say, because we know we gain from eating plants.
Yeah.
We know there's cultures that like to eat shark fins or monkey brains. Yeah. So the idea, again, it goes back. The human mind is capable of like anything, thinking up stuff. So like, why not try it? And the study of why an idea gets perpetuated, superstitions or, why that's an interesting subset to study. Why would someone think eating a baby, so we know why. We know that we're capable of thinking of that stuff, and then and just like in the ancient cultures, if someone knew the timing of a lunar eclipse or a solar eclipse, gathered the people and boom, and the lunar eclipse hit, that person was considered a genius, a god, whatever, super powerful. So if someone ate a child before going into a battle, and that guy actually ended up like taking the head of the opposing king, someone could say, dude, it's because he ate a child. And everyone goes, yeah, that must be it. Well,
but what I'm saying is that there's millennia of this going on. There's millennia of these ideas. And like you say, this is why, I mean, it's like everyone's going on about this new, sort of woke Snow White. But the fact is that in the original Grimm story, the evil queen, when she found out that Snow White was so beautiful, ordered the huntsman to take her to the forest to kill her, and then to bring her lungs and liver back so she could eat Snow White. Right? And then at the end, it wasn't just the apple. She was proffered a number of different things. So this idea, what I'm saying is that from an artistic point of view, these things run through stories, myths, culture. We have this idea of consuming.
Does it make it right, though?
And I
that's the question. Does it make it right?
No, I'm not saying it making it right at all. What I'm saying is that if there's a myth around the entertainment industry, I believe there's a myth around it, and the myth is that you're going to make it, and it's a bit like you're going to be admitted to Mount Olympus, and it doesn't exist. Whenever I got close to it, it was always a shock of, oh, this is exactly like normal life. They're all idiots. They're not any special. They're not beautiful people. They're just idiots, the same as everybody else.
Except they have $80 million and mansions and cars, and I mean, they do get it. They're the ones on the silver screen starring in movies, or they're the ones on tour. They're the Taylor Swifts. I mean, there is that.
And so I think what we've got in our culture is that if you are aiming to be like a film star or pop star or in the industry in some way, we have been pumped that this is a dangerous thing to do, that you join a club, it's the devil's bargain. I had this right from day one with my best friend Kevin Gammond, who's best friends with Robert Plant, and he always called that thing the devil's bargain. He used to say to the students, he wouldn't say when you sign a record deal, he goes when you do the devil's bargain. And it struck me how much this is wound in to our folklore, and so that the idea that if you're a powerful human being, that this gets you access to a club where the normal morality doesn't need to operate anymore. And that allows you to do this because you're almost like one of the chosen ones into this club. And it's not a moral club. It's the opposite. It's the club that in the old days would have been the harem of the tyrant. You see what I'm saying? Is that there is a want in humanity to become the tyrant, and to get to that point where they've got the harem. And in some regions in ancient times, there was no women left because the main alpha male tyrant had the lot. It was actually a problem for humanity that he had the lot. I was reading the other day about that one of the greatest abusers of children in the 20th century was Gaddafi. He was a U.S. ally. He was a U.S. ally. He was taught here in the UK in military school. But as he ascended up and became sort of more in control of, he was the law. Before he died, he basically would visit schools, and he told his people that if he touched the head of a child, that child was taken to his palace and would then be abused and disappear. And this happened 1,000, 2,000 times.
Well, I wonder who made that study and what comparative analysis they used. I mean, who did they judge? What standard was he judged against? What other people are doing that?
Yeah.
How would they know that he got the first prize of
And so what I'm saying is that the reason I'm saying this all to you, Ben, is because when you said earlier on, there's child abuse, there's cannibalism, and all this type of stuff. Gaddafi is a powerful person that is doing this, but we can talk about that because he's not from a Western liberal capital world.
Right.
Idi Amin was eating his enemies.
It's easy to demonize those people.
Yeah. So you're allowed to say that there.
Right.
And then we differentiate
about it. You couldn't say that about a British, royalty or an American president without being considered a absolute insane cuckoo.
Yeah, or someone that our culture's invested into, like Puff Daddy, who's I've always sat there going, why is he a billionaire? What's he done? It's like he's not a great rapper, he's not a great producer. What the hell has he done to be there? It's like,
well, the theories are fascinating. On the one hand, he was simply, it could be argued, simply a tool, as many have been used throughout time to orchestrate blackmail. By collecting these tapes and providing orgies, he's able to control, his controller is able to control the entire Hollywood industry. The military industrial complex was already controlling Hollywood through its green lighting of scripts. They've been doing that for a long time, but I guess they wanted to control the politicians who went to these parties and everyone. It's been argued. I've heard another argument, which is that the whole, in the vein of the MK Ultra 1960s acid hippie movement, that was a contrivance or a creation of, let's say, CIA, that what someone like Puffy did was enable a similar thing to take place in Black America or all of America, that the tastes being shaped by the rap culture, and that the rap culture was being controlled behind the scenes to perpetuate more homosexuality. The imagery in these rap videos that had trans men and that glorified homosexuality. There's that whole angle as well. The angle of entry of homosexuality enters the picture. And so there's a lot of, and so it's about controlling a culture and making cultural shifts that are able to serve the needs of the people calling the shots, to redirect culture the way they want. Another thing is that apparently some people think Puffy just pissed off a liquor company, and I can't remember their name. Maybe it's better that I don't name them, but he basically was he was a spokesperson for an international liquor conglomerate, let's say. And the story I heard is that when Puffy got so big, he turned around and tried to tell them how it was going to go down at a board meeting. Like, no, we're going to do this. And they were just like, sorry, dude, you're not on the board. You don't run the show here. And that's when they dropped the ball on him to take him out of his leadership position for whatever organization he was serving. It's interesting, going back to what you said about all this history of cannibalism, the history of sexual trafficking, human slavery. I kind of stumbled. It's all very new to me. I stumbled upon it one tributary when I'm part Finnish, and I thought, one of my theories is that everyone on the planet has a history of slavery somewhere back. If you go far enough. Yeah. And I thought, well, what's the history of Finnish slavery? And that brought me into the Tartars, the Turkish raids up into Finland to get the beautiful blonde children that were desired by sultans and, people in Africa who wanted white kids, white sexual slaves, and as opposed to the Russians or the North Europeans who wanted dark black slaves. But the point is that a lot of what you're talking about, the entry into these, the selling of your soul moment, is also a way to be controlled by the club you join, because everyone knows you can't let this information out. The rest of society is going to hang you if they find out you do this. So you do this and we got you because we've all witnessed you do it, so now you're in, kind of like the mafia or something.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm trying to say is that when you look at human history, human history is this. What elevated us out of this was actually sort of Enlightenment thinking, liberal philosophy, things that then built this sort of American Constitution, which I think are really, really powerful, strong things. But that's a rarity. When you're breathing that air, you're breathing a rare air, because most of human history hasn't been that. It's been just brute power. Absolute brute power, and it's been unchecked, and it has been the rule of the tyrant, and whoever, whatever they say is the way it is, and if they're benign, and if they're not, they're not. And right. So I think we have to understand that these entertainment industries, and also the political class now, because I think one of the things that's not been explored is how these other realms have sort of taken on the rock and roll spirits. So when you watch Wolf of Wall Street, that film, which I think is exaggerated, but you could tell that, these investors, they're doing it not to make millions. They want the millions so they can lead the rock and roll lifestyle. And we've celebrated the rock and roll lifestyle.
Yes, we have.
All the way through, and we've championed it. It's like...
Yeah, you're right. You're right, Andy. We don't celebrate a civics-minded, suit-wearing, speech-giving, nice guy or nice woman.
Yeah.
I remember my dad's generation. They used to idolize Supreme Court justices or even Eleanor Roosevelt. The wife of one of the U.S. presidents who made it a point to go around and and to try to uplift humanity. Through very non-glamorous ways. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of people who they've been brought up to feel that success and greatness is the ability to, as you say, leave this rock and roll lifestyle.
I think if you're a young girl and you've got your work and you're really talented and you come into sort of this almost like fatherly music industry that's above you, we all know about this, and then they'll go, you got to go and speak to so and so. It's like, me being in the industry, get to a certain age and being a teacher, it's always like me, the say 40-50-year-old music teacher who knows stuff, and a girl being brought to me who's 17 years ago, and how do you help her, what does she need to do, blah blah blah, and all this type of stuff. So that the sort of Star is Born, that thing exists. In most cases,
same with boys and young men.
Yeah. Same with boys. It's always like this, and your mentors and stuff like this. And then if you've got those contacts and you start to make manoeuvring, I could see how easy it is to land at a party somewhere, and that party it's almost like an initiation. And I've read this, that there's people who they were about to sign in Los Angeles, and they said go to this party. They go to the party, and there's a series of rooms, and as they pass through the rooms, things are becoming more and more debauched as they pass through. And this is also, I mean, do you think that's true or not?
No, I'm absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm laughing because that should not be any part of a job interview. Yeah, that should never. And this whole, I absolutely believe I've heard those stories, and I've heard people. And you have a chance to get out. Someone says, say, can I have my phone and you can have my mobile phone and my, driver's license back because I'm going. That's going. Almost like swimming up a waterfall, though, especially for young people.
For young people, yeah. That's
my
young
point. People. One of the things is it's hard for young people, especially, to say no, thank you. Or, you know what? I've decided this doesn't work for me. I'm going to get my phone and leave now. That's hard to say when you're in a thunge. Maybe you've had a couple of drinks. Maybe there's a lot of big, strong dudes around you. And maybe right down the hall is your God, your hero. Yeah. You fill in the blank, like we were talking about. You see all these indications of power, everything you've grown up idolizing. And you're getting these weird feelings, and you're thinking, no, I'll be okay. I'll go one step further. So how do we train people? I'm very interested now in delivering talks or just sharing information, whatever, writing up a list of red flags for people to, how do you see this coming? Because like you say, if it's progressive, one room, you get invited to a party, it all looks cool. It's a party. One room, run room, one room back. You're getting closer to the lion's den. And it's what's interesting to me about all this, Andy, is what do we guys like us who have some sort of, who are a little further down the path, and other industry leaders, where are the industry leaders that run organizations where no one has to fear for this stuff? And how do we get those people?
They're not going to do it. They are never, this is my point. They are never going to go, we need to stand up against this. And what they're going to do is they're going to put up other things and say we need to stand up against this. They're not going to address. This became really apparent with me. I wish I could remember the name of the film that Mel Gibson funded about child sex trafficking, which I watched, and I had to watch it in stages because
that's The Sound of Freedom.
Sound of Freedom. Yeah, I watched it in stages because I'd watched 20 minutes ago. I can't take this anymore.
Wow, I haven't seen it.
I watched 10 Years a Slave, or whatever it's called. Is it 10 Years a Slave? Yeah. All the Oscars for 10 Years a Slave, and it's terrible, and it shows you what it was like to be a slave for 200 years ago, and that's all rewarded, right? Don't think I'm saying I'm not against slavery is terrible, but my point is that when you have slavery 200 years ago going on, but you have child slavery on a much bigger level happening right now, and yet the Oscars reward 10 Years a Slave with every accolade going. But this film, it was just strange how people going, well, it's all conspiracy theory. Hollywood just turned, and it's like, why didn't they say, well, if this is true, it's awful?
Well, because it's them. Because
exactly.
Exactly. I hate to use this analogy, but he was fingering them. He was fingering the industry, and they're scared shitless. I mean, that's why the Grammys and the Oscars, they're connected. It's $1 billion industry of on that level.
Yeah, we're not saying they're incriminated. What we're saying is that within this, this stuff is going on, and the only way you could clear it up is to actually, from a cultural point of view and a moral point of view, because I know there's some people are going, well, if they want to have orgies and it's all adults, I can't see a problem with that. But when it crosses like, and I'm going, no, you don't understand. In that situation where people are being drawn into that situation, right? It might not be illegal, but it's immoral. And and if you can't say something's immoral,
let's talk about that.
That is not, you don't have the buffer towards it's then the next thing is being illegal. You haven't got the buffer. That's why we have morals,
Now that's interesting. You're gonna have to sell me on that, because personally, I believe, and this came up in my talk with Harvey Mason Jr. and in some of the emails, like, we're artists, and one thing the Grammys made clear is they're not going to police, as of right now. They're, you can't tell musicians that you can't drink, you can't party, you can't have sex at the studio. I mean,
but the thing is, in modern pop music tours, they have dry tours. Even in the UK, we've got dry tours now. You sign a contract, you say you are not going to drink on this tour.
Well, you can do
why
that.
Can't you do that? Why can't you say that?
Well, let me back up. You can say anything you want.
Yeah,
of course.
Exactly.
And the governments can do pretty much whatever they want. If they want to federalize, if they want to, mandate with laws.
No, I don't agree with it being in law, but in terms of an industry, it's different for an industry saying you're not going to do this if you want to be part of this industry. So
this is why I just, I don't drink anymore. I don't have any problem with people who do drink. You brought up orgies. I happen to be in the camp that feels if it's consenting adults and they're not hurting anybody, and certainly adults, if it's consenting adults, do what you want. And
I think that totally, except what I'm saying is there is a buffer between somebody having an orgy and then it suddenly goes over to being illegal. I'm saying is that we used to have a society that if you did have an orgy, it was sort of frowned upon. Morally, people would judge you. What's happened through?
I don't know. I wonder if that's true. I wonder if that's true in the Greeks. I wonder if that was always true. Well, in fact, I know. Well, here, let's talk about that.
It was more the Romans, wasn't it, that did this, and they were doing this as their empire fell, as their empire crumbled. This is where they, because the thing is morals. I think morals and culture play a very strong part.
I don't think you can legislate morals. That's the thing.
You can't. No, we not. What you can have is you can have them enshrined in your culture. Right. So, for example, we think
enshrining is a tricky word. Like, how are you going to enforce that? What does enshrining mean?
You don't enforce it. It's within the art. It's actually within the art itself. If you've got freedom of speech, right? I'll give me an example. Right. Steven Spielberg makes Schindler's List, and it says how horrible that is. Right. In that, he plays out all sorts, and he tells all sorts of stories. You come out of that and you say to yourself, I don't think it was right what the Nazis did to the Jews in the war, right? And you go, yeah, well, it's illegal to do that. And you go, yeah, that's not the point the film's making. The point is not saying it's illegal. What it's saying is it's not right. The art always is a part of art. It's not the totality of the art, but part of it is to sell certain moral ideas. Now, we're in a situation of an atrophied.
Yeah, but hold on, wait a sec. Keep that thought, but let me jump in. You like the movie and you like what the movie was teaching from a moral perspective. Yeah. What if you found out that the people who made the movie are morally are completely amoral? You know,
then but the nature of what the art says is untouched by that. Absolutely untouched. Of course it is, yeah. Because the thing is that our morality is shifting all the time. That's not true.
When people learn, that's the cancel culture. When people learn that, if they learn that Martin Luther King, for example, was having orgies in his hotel room, then some people abandon his message, or some people decide,
he's not an artist. He's got a political message. It's different to art.
Miles Davis was a wife beater. Do we hate his music now?
No.
Some people, but some people do.
Idiots. What I'm saying is that thing is what is causing this. It plays into this. That cancel culture thing of going, we can't judge the art. Right. If you want this to stop, you have to have a morality, and that morality is what. Let me. Well, let's. Right.
This is hold on. This is the line. I'm agreeing that there needs to be a line drawn. There is a line in the sand somewhere. There is. You can't do this to children. That's for sure. That to me is crossing. Drugging.
But the thing is that you've got to understand that morally that is negotiated. I'll tell you how it's negotiated. All over the world, the age of consent is different from country to country. There we go. So you could say you're trying to go.
How about 3-year-olds? Is that negotiable? 3 or 5-year-olds?
It's negotiated. It's negotiated by human beings.
So 5 years old is okay, but 3.
No, I didn't say it was okay. What I'm saying is that morality where we think it's not okay has been negotiated by human beings. Right. So up until 1967 in this country, you went to prison if you were homosexual. At that point, the negotiation had said that it's actually against the law, not just immoral, but against the law to engage in homosexuality in this country. And then that moral was renegotiated. It was renegotiated, and that primarily came from artists. And the artist that really opened up in this country was D.H. Lawrence with the Lady Chatterley's Lover, which went to court because they tried to ban it. And then by going through that, the piece of art, and deciding it wasn't bad, that opened up a whole train of events which changed the morality. Believe me, there are people on the identity lot that are arguing that it's okay if paedophilia is okay. If we forget that these are negotiated and think they're absolute, like they're coming down from God and they're absolute, that I believe is the root of the problem. Because once you've got that an absolute morality, it's not questioned, and it allows this to happen.
Well, what you just described is a totally flexible and changing morality. Like for some
that's what we have.
Well, and so there you go. If it's flexible, then one day abusing children might be okay.
Yes, it might be. So how do you stop that?
Well, history tells us.
How are you going to explain?
I'll answer your question if you give me a second here.
Yeah, go on.
History shows us that we have not been able to stop that.
No,
as of yet. Being aware of it. So so what's the next best step? Just being as aware and vigilant and aligned, and committed to stopping it as we can be. Yeah, that's like plastic pollution. We're never going to get we're never going to
But you
get
see,
all.
I haven't, because I'm a creative person. I've argued for the arts all the way through. I believe that, government needs to fund arts. I think they need to make people creative, because our morals, the most important thing about us, our morals are negotiated in the arts. If someone was arguing against it, I would say, go and watch Sound of Freedom, because I could not watch it. Because the artistry of that film tells a story.
What if all that's fake?
It's all fake.
What if it's
That's what
right,
art is. But
fake.
So what art does is you create something which negotiates beauty, and within the negotiation of beauty is the negotiation of what is right and wrong. So you cannot explain. You have to put yourself in another person's point of view. That's what art often does. I'm not saying it's always on a moral level. Jazz isn't so much on a moral, but there is something, because jazz points to democracy and people living together with different voices. That's within jazz, and you can study it from that point of view. But my point here, that if we forget
jazz and democracy, no. But anyway, I called you on the first time we met, but I'm with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, if you say it's not, and you say because there's someone in charge, I will turn around and go, yeah, that's what it is. There are people in charge, and you do have to do what the band leader says. And then within that, you've got the space to solo. That's your weekend when you go fishing. So we can have a discussion using jazz to discuss freedom, to discuss how a society works. We can have a discussion about it. Now, my point is, if you stop freedom of speech, if you curb, and you've got artists like us worried about what we're saying in this video, when all we're trying to argue is abusing kids is bad, right? You're trying to find an absolute morality, but what my point is, if you actually
no. I don't think my suggestion that the Grammys adopt an ethics commission is my admittance or concession to the idea that this is something that needs to be determined, that constantly needs to be re-examined and redefined. If you're gonna let's use the word police, but if you're going to oversee a group, an academy, you should have some expectation. How do we expect award-winning artists to comport themselves? Are there any boundaries that they should observe?
Do you remember when the AIDS thing was happening in the 90s? The Red Hot and Cool organization came out and they made a series of CDs. I bought quite a few of them. My favorite one was the hip hop and jazz. We got Ron Carter and MC Solar together, Michelle Endegacello. I bought that album as just a kid. I wasn't thinking about AIDS, I wasn't thinking about AIDS in the black community, for example. I bought that album, and listening to that album, I got an understanding of what was going on, because the industry had funded something moral and positive. They had funded something that had a message, right? My point here is the powers that be do not want the art to actually criticize this. We're in a situation where they will not let this come through. They will stamp on it. If you say certain things about this, the industry will stamp on it. That's what I believe.
It will stamp on what?
The artistic expression of why this is so wrong. They are getting us. We are sat here, and I'm sat here. I don't even know whether I'm going to put this one out. You see, I don't know whether because it's. I don't want to be taken out. I don't want to lose my living. I don't want to be cancelled. And I think, what am I talking all the way through? I'm going, what are we talking about? We're talking about absolutely right things, right?
That's right.
But we're censoring ourselves. I'll give you an example of what I'm saying. In the UK here, we have had 1 million children abused, and they've been abused by Pakistani grooming gangs. It's been going on for 40 years, and it has been covered up by the powers that be. For 40 years, it's been covered up. And for many years, if you said this, you got called a conspiracy theorist. I have said it, and I had to leave all the bands that I was in because certain members didn't like the fact that I was pointing it out. So I decided just to leave the bands because this was becoming a thing where I was going, this is really bad. And people go, you're just talking right-wing conspiracy theory. Then Elon Musk.
Let me ask you to clarify. When you said it was being covered up or not, are you saying that the UK, that the English government didn't want to hear people talk about Pakistanis doing this?
Yeah, because they were saying that at every level they said this will turn into a race war. We cannot say that we can't say this is going on, and because it was so different to the normal type of abuse, and so you have situations where parents would have a daughter 13 years old has been kidnapped and is being held in a house, being raped by literally hundreds of people all day long, losing weight, being abused, having all the worst things happening to them, and the dad goes down to try and get them out, and the police is there and arrests the dad. Right, that millions were paid off to cover things up, that the powers that be, and you haven't been able to talk about this until Elon Musk tweeted about it. Now it's out in the open, and now everyone's all the powers have been going, oh yes, it's terrible, terrible, terrible. Now what's come out in the UK here last week was a TV series on Netflix called Adolescence. And this is in the background of a number of stabbings we'd had. And what they've said is it's the story of a middle-class white boy with nice middle-class parents that has been taken towards this sort of behavior. He's murdered someone and abused this child because of basically watching Andrew Tate videos. Now, the government actually...
I don't know Andrew Tate. Is that...
Yeah,
is that in English?
He's one of these sort of a lot of young men follow him, and he's very toxic and misogynistic.
Is he a living person now?
Yeah. He's Andrew Tate, and he's huge. He's one of the biggest people in the internet. And you know, when I taught in schools, all the kids loved Andrew Tate. Huh. Now, we have been calling in the UK. Everyone's calling for an investigation into the grooming gangs that's happened. Million children. They reckon it's 1 million now. Right, because it's been 40 years. It's a ridiculous thing that's happened. The fact that you don't know about it is astonishing because it's the worst calamity to befall this country. People are in prison.
That goes to show how much it's still covered and not talked about. You know, these stories, if they do make it to the news, to the U.S. news, they're buried. I've heard of these things. These things are coming to light in America. You know, people are talking about shipping containers coming into Los Angeles ports and into major ports, New York, that are filled with children, that are here to be groomed. And here the story is it's called the CPS, the Child Protective Services. They're the ones being fingered for being the culprits. These are the people who go into homes and say to the parents, you're abusing this child, or your negligent parent will take the child. And what they do is they take the child and then put it into the home of a pimp. Or whatever, to be groomed.
I mean, these groups that are doing this are also walking into villages in your neck of the woods, finding people who are very poor, saying, if you give us one of your kidneys, we'll pay you 2,000 quid, flying them out to Africa, whipping their kidney out, and then dropping them with the bill for the medical costs. And then selling the thing on. And a lot of these people who are kidnapped and put into sexual slavery, once they're totally destroyed, they are then harvested for organs. I mean, this is now. Someone could just go, Andy's off his head. He shouldn't. I don't even know whether I should say this. I don't even know whether I should put this video out.
If someone were to say, Andy, you're off your head, you would simply say, I'm only referring to, and what's your source for all of this? I mean, you must have a couple sources for this.
I've been studying this for about 10 years.
So there's authors.
There's books and authors, and there's sort of YouTube videos and documentaries.
So you're not off your head. The people who wrote these books are off the head, and you're just an innocent guy reading books.
I am a free speech advocate. That is my thing. And the reason is not because I'm all moral. It's because I'm an artist, and I think artists should be able to say what they want to say. And I think artists should be able to make mistakes. I think people should be able to say things that are wrong. If somebody came and proved any of this wrong, now some of it must be wrong. I am able to go, some of this must be wrong, but as I am not a politician, I am a citizen. I have a right to go, is this going on? We have a right to go, is this really going on? If it is, I don't like it.
course.
right? We have a right to
Yes,
do that. And now the
of
fact is,
course.
some of it could be wrong, but some of it is covered up. Now the grooming gang thing in the UK, this is a brilliant example of it, because when Elon Musk made that tweet and said, "This is really ridiculous. Why isn't they doing something about it?" The government had to turn around and say, "Well, we have been doing something about it." They haven't been doing anything about it. Now, this adolescence documentary
Mm-hmm.
that's come out, that has
Yeah.
restructured the narrative. And straight away, the government, who have put money in to make it, have stood up and say this has to be shown in schools. And the reason is because they're going to now say, you are right, these grooming gangs have happened, but it's nothing to do with the culture of the people coming in. It's nothing to do with the Islamic faith. It's nothing to do with any of this. It's to do with bad stuff online. And so we need to get our online censorship bill through. That will be the result. That will be the result of this. That is how, what I'm saying is that is how the twist happens.
Yeah.
And that's what you're up against. Is then it's not you think it's straight down the line. They go, God, this is disgusting. Yeah, we got to say something about this. You know, do we really need to go through all the people in rock music history, rap music history that have allegedly had relations with underage people? There's whole songs about it. I needed a top 10 of songs about this.
You know,
You know,
I think it is worth delineating or sharing, because I think uh, it gives people a chance to realize just how thoroughly they have been duped and fed a false narrative. I mean, it's almost like our whole reality has been created. You know, people joke and they talk about the Matrix, and you know what? But you know, for our entire lives, we're seeing now, starting with media, we've been fed a lot of lies or
of course we have.
deceptions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we've been fed as a foundation upon which we have built our reality. So yes, there's a danger in stripping that away, but the reason why you list all those people is so that people have a chance. You know, people like us, our generation may be screwed, you know, with cognitive dissonance and psychosis as a result of being shown what's behind the curtain. But the next generation, you know, people wonder about AI. How can you tell AI fakes? And well, how can you, if our children see the techniques that have been employed against their parents, they might have a chance the next time around, you know, to see
What it comes down to is letting artists have freedom of speech, letting them explore this, and because the thing is, if an artist does something bad, right? So if you take sort of the black metal, you know, Norwegian metal bands that were like burning churches and killing each other and doing that, I mean, really, really immoral sort of rock music that's there, that type of music. There's an aspect of that that's actually positive in the art. There's an aspect of that that's immoral. It's satanic and all these things, right? You cannot counter that by arguing against it. You need another piece of art. People don't understand the power of art. They don't understand the power of films. Our morals, your morals don't change through having an argument. They can, but they really change when you see something. You know, it's like when you see a Rembrandt and you look at him when he's young and when he's old, you get an idea what it is to be old. When you're young, you look at Rembrandt because he's able to express that. That's what art does. You have to there is a tendency at the moment that I believe the noble values of the 1960s that enabled, you know, racism to be combated to a certain extent, you know, women's rights, gay rights, all these things that were really positive. Those ideas have atrophied now, and people believe that you can hold on to that by censorship and shutting people up. I don't believe the Woodstock generation had any of that in them. This has atrophied, and that's what we're seeing at the moment. And within that space, we are able to see how certain really evil entities that have always been there are able to do their thing. What's happened now is the internet's cracking it open. That's what's happening. But what I'm saying is it would be very easy to blame this all on to censor what people are saying. That's my point. I think that's where it landed. That's what's happening here in the UK with a number of things that's happened.
That's pretty intense. I do you think that it's just artists who should be able to say
Everyone should be able to say whatever they want to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and people will say bad stuff. And if people say bad stuff, you need to show them up So you have to have freedom of speech and freedom of expression. You have to be able to call them out. The racists are still there. You know, identity politics didn't get rid of them. They've just learned what not to say. They've just set up a big code that if you don't say this, you don't say that, so no one can say the N-word anymore. And so that's stamped out racism? No way. They're still there. I'll tell you where it is, that there's no bloody systemic racism. There's no, you know, that's in law. We've gone through the laws. We've done a really incredible thing, human beings have, but the racists are still there. And the identity lot are looking in the wrong places. They think it's in some sort of ghost in the machine, systemic white supremacy race. It's not there. It's in racist people who are keeping their mouths shut because you've trained them to keep their mouths shut and you don't know where they are. And it's in a power elite that are taking children in and doing all this stuff and then covering it up because they're saying, we're the elites, they'll never tell anyone about it. In the UK, we had Jimmy Savile, our biggest TV star of the 1970s, who abused about 1,000 children and was basically at one point.
I read about that.
Yeah,
I mean, nothing happened to him, and it wasn't until after he died.
And he knew he was going to get. I mean, the thing is he would have a laugh dropping clues on television. There's a whole raft of YouTube videos of just Jimmy Savile going up to young girls and going, "Oh, aye, hello, judge," and saying things like that on television.
What does judge mean? What is?
He's acting like he's in court. Being done
I got you. I get it. I see.
Going, I know it'll be 10 years.
Now,
Judge. You know,
was he Pakistani?
No, he was white. Yeah,
he was a white Englishman, huh? Yeah.
All races abuse. All races abuse, right? And, my granddad he was Muslim and he ended up in Pakistan, and my great granddad is one of the guys that actually invented the idea of Pakistan, a guy called Sir Syed Ahmed Khan. He came up with that. I grew up with this. I got Muslim people in my family, and I'm very aware that when I was younger, way before this happened, my mum turned around, she said, the problem you've got in Pakistan is there's a big wealth of difference of types of people. And a lot of the people that are going into the UK from Pakistan, culturally, they have a whole different set of values to the metropolitan types. And so there's a culture coming in, and it's alien to UK culture. It's a certain set of beliefs that have enabled this to happen. And so you have to be able to question those beliefs. But at the moment, our government is trying to bring in Islamophobic laws, which means that we cannot criticize the tenets of Islam. Now, I've spent my whole life criticizing the tenets of Christianity and thought that was very healthy for that to happen, or to criticize Judaism or any religion. I thought that was what was it to be a good moral country. I respect Christians. I respect a lot of the values in Christianity. I respect a lot of the values in Islam. But I always thought that, you know, the bits that are really bad, like Muhammad marrying his having a 6-year-old wife and then having sex with her with 9 years old, you should be able to call that out. But people who are calling that out in here are having to go into hiding.
Really? Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And so nobody wants to, they don't want to see the nuance and realize that this is you have to get in there. I've been involved with this for so many years. So this is why when I saw your thing, I was like, oh, I got to chat to Ben about this.
I'm wondering if AI might be a tool that helps people, its ability to create faceless videos, as they're being called, you know, animations, really, where again, people can now express themselves without putting their identity stamp on it.
How about we just stop putting people in prison for telling the truth? How about that?
Okay,
that would be quite good, wouldn't we? We've got hate speech laws.
How are you going to do that, Andy? I would love it if someone would just, but that's not going to stop for a while, right?
I think we had it more. I think the 1960s, the revolution in civil rights of the 1960s was so useful and so amazing. And I think I can remember in the 1980s going to art college.
I mean, I'm wondering, like in America, we had, you know, the civil rights movement. My father was deeply involved with that. Women's rights, you know, we had abortion rights. And now it seems like, you know, that's almost 60 years ago. Are things any better?
I mean, way better.
Some things.
Oh, no, they're way better by a magnitude that cannot be calculated. They are way better. this
in what
this
you mean
narrative that it's still
in a systemic sense, like from the laws, or like you said, it hasn't changed the people. The racism is still
oh, you've
there.
still got racists, but the
Yeah.
thing is, you always have racists. You know where the most racists are? Do you know where they are that we're not thinking about? The
In
non-white
England.
racists. But if you follow the ideology that they've pumped out now, it's only white people are the only ones who can be racist. That's the ideology we're living in. And I have mixed race people in my family, and they get racism from all the races. But apparently when they get racism from people who aren't white, that's just prejudice. It's not racism, because they have renegotiated what racism is. This is the whole point. We are being shut up, and you and me are doing a dance on this of what we can say and what we can't say, because an ideology is out there that shuts you up, and that's what you've come up against the Academy. They don't even know why they're dodging this one. They just know they just have to.
I tend to think they know why they are dodging it. I mean, I think my guess is that somebody knows, and everyone else is following. You know, they're pulling the strings, you know, to keep their jobs. You know, there are people who say, yes, Ben, you're doing the right thing. We should be addressing this.
Okay, but so if that's the case, when George Floyd got, killed by the police, why did the whole world go, this is terrible, straight away? And I was sat there going, you got to put your black square on Facebook now. Put your black square on. Put your black square on, And then as soon as that organisation embezzle all those millions out of the people who donated for it, the media doesn't mention it. And so why was it so okay to go, this is terrible? This is terrible. And I agree, it was, but why is it the other side of it? Because there's always another side. Why is that closed down? Why is it, if I point that out, I've said this, I said that BLM organisation was rotten to the core. Absolutely rotten to the core. And it's been shown to be the case, and everyone knows that is the case, right? But that, in just saying that, you feel like you're crossing a line. You're now saying something that's dodgy, and I'm now going to get in the neck for saying that, even though it's the truth. Everybody knows that's the truth.
Well, the collective consciousness has been controlled, has been co-opted, and that's the kicker. Those tribes.
So how do you change that so that people aren't like sweeping aside massive sex trafficking that's happening all over the world amongst all races and all sorts of different things, with all sorts of different things going on? Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's daunting. You know, everyone, like you said earlier, people, for the most part, they worry about where to take a pee or a poop, or where to get the food for their family's dinner. Where's the fresh water? How do I keep the rain off of us tonight while we sleep? So when you throw something this heavy on people, most people are going to go, anyone who's listening will go, wow, that is terrible. That needs to end. But then the reality is that they're like, they can't hold on to that until a solution is found, because it's so deep, it's so dark, it's so daunting. That would consume an individual's life into a cinder. It's so big and so beyond any individual's ability to solve. But part of it, I think, is just becoming aware. The more awareness, and that's kind of what the movement of the 60s was. You talk about, it was building an awareness. It's not like every acid dropping hippie was actually doing something, but collectively they were showing up and saying, hey, there's something wrong going on, and we don't like it. And I don't know.
We're going through a cultural shift at the moment, I believe. I think that a lot of the values that emerged in the 1960s that have been, because I believe in every single moral statement, there's always nuance. And if you were to take any moral statement and then it's trying to enshrine it in law and create an ideology around it, before you know it, there's a payoff somewhere else where it's been detrimental. So we have to be able to negotiate ethics and morality. Now, some people say, no, that's absolute, and they're the religious types. On the far right, that's what I worry about, is the religious types getting into the system. And because I think, America's been so great because of being having a secular political system. I think that's so great. And I believe everyone should be able to worship what they want and believe what they want. I just believe in freedom of expression, tolerance, letting people say what they want, not banging them in prison, not shutting them down, letting them have their say. And that's my answer to the Grammys. Why don't you just let everybody have their opinion and put a video out and just say that's what they all think. We've all got different opinions and that's what they say. But they won't do it because they're frightened. And that fact that they're frightened is frightening to me.
Yeah, a number of people are frightened for their lives, you know. I mean, people die over this stuff. So they've got a good job. They've gotten, you know, they got the keys to the kingdom,
Yeah.
and it's theirs as long as they just shut up and make problems go away. And you know, they've crossed that line you talked about. They made a deal.
Yeah, you make a
And
deal with the devil. That's the trouble with this. You make a deal with the devil. That's why monks tend to go off to some mountain retreat and don't have any dealings with the world. Because if you want to get your head together, that's where you go. But if you want to do something creative, that's the devil's bargain. As soon as you put your head in there, you're putting your head in there. I've read. I mean, I'm really aware of this because I made 1,000 videos on YouTube. I am deep into this now. Right, and before that, I was a musician, and before that, I was a painter. I was an artist, and so I'm aware of the creative. This is a creative statement. It's a funny creative statement, but it's something that happens on YouTube. We're not being checked. This isn't an essay. We're not there. No one's going through what we've said and checking that it's true or not. We're having a conversation, and people will listen to it and think, "Oh, these two blokes are chatting. They're having a conversation." What comes out of that? People have got to go away and go, "Oh, what? I don't know what to think." And then they might do some research, and they might come back to me and say, "Andy, I think you were wrong," and I'll go, "Come on the channel then." And if they prove me wrong, because I've really thrown some stuff out here, and you've thrown a very specific thing out of here that is true. You've explained your direct experience of being a Grammy, you know, member, and of what's gone there, and something that where your moral antennae, was going, hang on, this is a bit strange.
I'll tell you something else that happened. I didn't realize you talked about songs, and this guy Jimmy, who was the guy in England, Jimmy with the children that said, "Hello, Judge."
Jimmy Savile, yeah.
Okay, all these people who are leaving clues, and we remember the opening to the Summer Olympics last year. Well, yeah. I went for the first time. I went to the Grammys, 2023, and even though I had been a member for at that point 10 years, I'd never made it out to LA for the award ceremony. You still have to pay your own way, you know, and buy a ticket and all this. Well, I was in a position to get there. I was doing interviews. I was filming interviews for the We Are Here Women in Jazz film I'm working on, which is, as you said earlier, meeting people. The only questions I had were women and men about masculine and feminine energy on stage in this business. That's what led me to meeting Native Americans. That led me into further research regarding. So the point is, I go to LA. I'm going to pick up a few interviews, and it just happens to be the Grammys. So why don't I throw down and go, and obviously maybe network which happened. I met two people, a music producer and a singer, who will be in the movie as well, speaking to their trying to make their inroads. Well, the producer actually has worked with Dr. Dre and Michael Jackson, and he has some cool stories. But here's what I'm getting
he does. You're opening another can of worms there, straight off.
Well, we didn't go there with him on that.
I'm only just pointing out that, you know, how carefully we have to tread.
Well, what was interesting with him is I asked him at one point, I said, "What's your experience with women in the studio? Do you see women being treated as equals, or is there a power dynamic?" And he thought, speaking to female producers, I think I asked him who his favorite female producers are, and he said, there aren't any. I haven't seen any. Like, his experience was that, most of what I had done is functioning in a man's world. But what I'm getting at is at the Grammy party. So you can get a ticket to the Grammys, which is actually two events, like the jazz and the classic and the world. Those musics are actually awarded in a separate building. They get the small bus.
Yeah.
In America, we have a joke about the school buses, and the small bus is reserved for the mentally challenged people. They take them to a different place. So the award ceremonies, the Grammys given to jazz artists, world music and classical, and a couple other categories, your reggae and stuff. Those all happen earlier in the day at a separate complex. It's right next to the main. So So you start your day at like noon to see the jazz awards. Then you get a break, you wander around, you go into the big boys club where the record of the year and all of that goes down. Well, if you want to, you can, for a limited time offer, you can buy a ticket into the Grammys after party. So the Grammys take place recently they've been taking place at the Staples Center in LA. It's like a huge arena. It's like a rock concert venue. Okay. The after party, however, is in like you leave the arena and you go back into the facility that housed the lesser jazz Grammys and whatnot. And so it's like a hotel conference rooms. It's a large conference room, dark, of course, it's darkened lights. It's set up to be more like a club. There's a stage in the back, and the large floor is filled with different food and alcohol centers. So, it's very inviting. People are strolling through, you're networking, you're kind of rubbing elbows with producers and people who just won their first or second Grammy. And there's food. There's, these tables where meats are being sliced and sandwiches are being made and whatnot. And then there's, of course, some wet bars, you can buy your alcohol. Well, this went completely over my head at the time, but I'm sitting there at a food table, meats are being sliced and it's essential. It's a sexy party, right? It's the Grammys. People are dressed sexy. It's musicians. It's a night of awards. Well, they have these elevated, like 4-foot high elevated stages right next to the food where men and women in scantily clad or skin tight leotards are just gyrating to these, funky little electro beats. And they're wearing feathers and mannequins. And so you're eating and you're watching someone basically at crotch level starting to gyrate in your face. And it's like a strip club, but with clothes while you're eating. And I got a little bit on my cell phone. People are filming. I thought this is really interesting. And you're this close. You're making eye contact, and these are clearly actors and dancers who have been hired. But in retrospect, when you look into what happens at these Puff Daddy parties, at the freak-offs, it's the people like that on a table that are put up there to be your sex toys. In other words, those tables are filled with children or young adults, whatever, hired sex workers sometimes. And you go up and you pick the one you want and you go off into a bedroom and you do whatever you want. And then you put them back on the table. And it's weird to me that possibly I was being shown a very real manifestation, like an coming attractions, or, I was being given a clue at this Grammys after party that these are the things that happen. I'm just saying, there's no proof behind what I'm saying, except for what I actually saw and that I have on a cell phone video. But a year later, I'm looking into this, and people like Ali Carter are on TikTok relating the stories, their experience that they went through as a captured sex slave.
It's on there's so many people have come out and said it's on a massive level. I think we've got to the back end of this. It's basically we've just gone up to this like hornet's nest. And I've gone, Ben, have you seen this hornet? Yeah, I've got to think about this hornet's nest. I've heard a thing. Well, let's have a kick of it then. And we've kicked it, and they're all flying around. That's what I feel. I don't think we can get any. We're not going to get them all to go back in. So I think we leave it there. And also, we're going to do another interview now, aren't we? Let's see what the time is, because this has been like
2 hours. 2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah, we'll finish up there. We'll have to do a short one on the AI.
Now, hey, Andy, consider this. If you're going to scrap most of this or edit it,
I don't know what I'm going to do with it.
Oh, maybe there's some bookends that we can say something safe.
I might do that. Yeah, I might do that. I don't know.
Well, just to put a bookend on my lovely experience on the phone with the professional and well placed Harvey Mason Jr. was that the idea of an ethics commission being instituted by the Grammys is something not to police people's behavior, not to see how many champagne you drank or whether you were drunk at the recording session. It's just it's to suggest that perhaps there is a line somewhere where artists that we're going to hold up as the greatest of humanity probably shouldn't be doing naughty things to underage people that are not consenting to those things. And that's
I think if the Grammys can get a just a simple ethics board that just states that eating babies is bad, you know.
Yes, that would be just posted in the bathroom above the urinals. And by the way, wash your hands, and eating babies is bad.
Yeah. We shouldn't be laughing, but it's because we're not laughing at it's not the fact that we're not laughing at the fact that happens or what doesn't happen or whatever. It's just the preposterousness of the situation we're in.
It's the preposterousness is that musicians, we always get together and laugh about this shit. That's the way we diffuse the insanity of the world.
Yeah, totally.
Is by drilling right into the heart of it and then laughing about it because it is so insane. You're right.
Well, I'm going to finish with a story. I'll tell you a story. John Scofield, the great John Scofield.
My buddy went on tour with him.
What?
I went to high school with one of my best friends is named Frank Vason. He's a Reeds man in New York City. He went on tour with Scofield, playing bass saxophone, Barry clarinet.
I bet that was on some of the they did some funky New Orleans type funky albums.
Yes, I don't know if Frank recorded with them, but he did the tour. The guy scheduled. Yeah. This is why right time, right place. Frank was in New York City. The guy scheduled got sick and called Frank. Frank said, "I can do it." He went on tour with Scofield, and that's after, as a young man in Denver, Colorado, he was playing so avant-garde. The blues guys I was working for told him, "Frank, you'll never play. You'll never get a gig in your life sounding like that."
So in the early 80s, Scofield goes for the audition for Miles Davis. So he goes to the audition, does the audition. He does really well. Miles really loves it. They goes home, and then a few days later, Miles rings up Scofield, and he goes, "Hi, John, it's Miles." He goes, "Yeah." He says, "You got the gig, man." And he says, "But there's a thing that everybody that joins my band has to do." And he goes, "What's that?" He goes, "You've got to perform oral sex on all the members in the band." And Scofield goes, "Well, Miles, I mean, I really want to be in your band. I don't know. I got to be honest. It's like my heart's desire to do this, but I don't think I can do that, Miles. I don't think I can do that." And then Miles just burst out laughing, and was winding him up in that way. And the fact is this sort of young Scofield thinking, "Oh, Miles Davis has said that." Now, what is Miles joking about there? It's funny.
I heard that story from the Bill Evans. It was Bill Evans that he said that to.
Oh, is it Bill? Yeah.
I heard that too. Maybe he did it to all the guys. I think
he
did
it so that it was like a thing he would do.
You know what it is? It's fucking with you, man, because it's saying like he knows he's Miles Davis. How bad do you want this? And he also knows that people hang on every single word Miles says. The last thing they expect Miles to be doing is the BSing. So he's right up. He's dumping you right into a life-altering decision, freaking you out.
When you watch the interviews with him, he's quite incredible. That one when they said, do you have to be black to play the blues? And look at the way Miles reacts to it. He's like, it's just the reaction that he has to the guy and the things he says at that point. I think he was an incredible guy going, because you mentioned the fact that he was, beat his wife up. Yes, he did. But I don't know. The musicians seemed to love him that played in the bands, didn't they?
Of course. I mean, his art transcended whatever his humanity was. I mean, and that's the thing.
It's another video. This is, isn't it? It's another video. Charles Mingus is another one. He didn't seem that nice, did he?
But the music is genius,
Yeah.
And it's.
Do you forgive great artists certain foibles, and then that basic? I think we've actually hit the end of the video. What could be the thing here? If you're a creative person, do you allow yourself to have certain foibles that normal people wouldn't have because you see yourself as being part of a group that has a different set of morals? And then once you get there, does that justify you to be behaving in this way? And does the fact that you've then been successful sort of almost give you a God-given right to behave in this way? I think that's what's behind this in a certain
Yeah, and the answer is not at all. I mean, if you're going to eat babies, if the culture doesn't put you to death, then at least make your art from behind bars.
No, they should. Yeah, I know this all sounds really bad to anyone watching this, but we have uncovered something. I go into all aspects of music. It does exist. Ben knows it. I know it. So that's that. We'll next time we'll just talk about something nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice
the 10 best
drum
performances by Harvey Mason. You know, I tell you, the track Captain Fingers, Lee Ritner. Listen to Harvey on that because it's all like it's really funky, but there's all these runs and sort of real complex stuff. It's incredible playing. So that's when I went, oh my God, this guy's a bloody genius. I'm switching off now. Goodbye, everybody.